welcome everyone to the latest edition of our Connected World podcast. I'm Steve Wilkinson. I'm joined here.
Stephen Richardson.
And Steve and I have both got a rich background in manufacturing technology, particularly in manufacturing operations, using data and visualizations. And together, I suppose we've looked at manufacturing technology over many years. And now we both work a little bit more in the innovation space and looking at new technologies and what new products and offerings we can bring to ITI Group. We're going to talk about the trends that we hear our clients talking about, and whether we believe there's something that's going to be a trend that matters in the future and whether it's going to develop into something. Where should we start?
Well, we want to start with talking about Industry 5 and Industry X. So we've obviously heard of Industry 3, Industry 4, and now Industry 5 is the new thing that is being talked about.
Yeah, that's right. And so for people who aren't aware, I suppose we won't go into the full story, but I guess the third revolution, manufacturing revolution, was all about automation and using computers and building the kind of Purdue model, getting information from your shop floor into a SCADA, maybe an MES on top of that, and getting that up to an ERP. Industry 4 kind of changed that model a bit, where it became easier to share data and people started talking about machine learning and how we can do more and sort of automating a lot more of the knowledge work. And I think you've got a good definition of Industry 5, haven't you?
I do, one that I found off the internet, of course, but I think it sums it up quite well. The well-being of the worker at the centre of the production process.
Yeah, that's it. What does that mean to you?
Well, so I think with Industry 4, a lot of the buzzwords that we're hearing now are similar with Industry 4. You know, cloud, big data, all these terminology. It's very similar, but the difference with Industry 5 is instead of being technology focused, I think it's more, as that quote says, the well-being of the worker. So how can technology serve the worker and make their life easier and more efficient? So it's changing focus a little bit, changing sentiment.
Yeah, I agree. It's that thing that any technology that we put into a shop floor now really needs to be focused on the value that it brings for the shop floor operator and so on. And I guess the trend that's emerging is assisting those operators in more and more of what they do. So this idea of a connected worker. And eventually, if you continue that trend to the point where actually people are talking about removing operators from the shop floor altogether and having lights out manufacturing, do you think that's a realistic future?
If you'd asked me that question a couple of years ago, I would have said no. But it's interesting how, when we looked at Industry 4, or when Industry 4 was the big thing 5 or more years ago, and we talked about cloud and things like this, people would often say, that's never going to happen. I've got to have my servers on premise. I'm worried about security and all the rest of it. Now, today, cloud is not an issue. So all these hurdles that you think are going to be roadblockers, as technology evolves quite quickly, are removed.
Yeah.
And so having seen that happen, and we now talk about, can we have companies that are lights out, or head towards lights out manufacturing? I would say it's definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Yeah.
I think one of the key changing points in that history for me anyway was, was COVID. And so people who maybe had a plan of 5 years' time, even to implement something like Teams that they weren't using, suddenly with remote working, they had to implement that overnight. In a few months, everyone had adopted these technologies. And we saw a similar thing with shop floor technologies, where certainly for the bigger companies where they could adopt technologies and keep put less people on the shop floor, that they accelerated all of those programs. And that included things like using the cloud and having workers, not on the shop floor and still performing the same tasks. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's like that trend is, was accelerated there, but you can see it continuing.
Exactly. And I think COVID's a good example. And another example where, which might cause things to accelerate is there's an aging workforce looking to retire. And in that workforce, there's a lot of experience and knowledge that's going to be lost when they retire.
Yeah.
And so with the new generation that's coming in, a big concern for companies is how we're going to train these new generation and hand over that experience. And I think that's where Industry 5 can play a part.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, or we see things like ChatGPT, these large language models, and how people will be quite aware of those things now. How can those things be used in manufacturing? And I think that's a great example. So, a company could implement a large language model and utilize that for training new workers, for example.
Yeah, certainly they could do that right now, can't they? With knowledge transfer, you can get, you can have a large language model, train it on your own information, this kind of thing, and an operator can ask questions and get an answer rather than have to go away and look it up and all this kind of stuff. And then I think where that will go to is it won't just be the knowledge part. Soon it will start being the experience as well. So under these conditions that I've seen in the past, you should take these actions rather than it just purely being like an ask and respond kind of thing. And I think that's where the use of data and machine learning models will really the use of data and machine learning models will really accelerate that from just being knowledge to actually passing on experience and wisdom from which was usually stored in people's heads.
Yeah, exactly. And with that new generation, these are people that are coming into the workforce and they're used to having data at their fingertips. They will expect to use new technology and they'll expect it to be there and available at an instant. And so it's a really good example where Industry 5 can really benefit companies and adopting those technologies that are available.
And how do you think people are going to interact with this information? Is it going to be iPads on the shop floor? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because, if I go back to Industry 4 again, we've talked about, we have this possibility of giving tablets or having operators use mobile phones and things like this. And I remember several years ago, a company coming in and talking to us about wearables and glasses. And I remember thinking at the time, it's just a gadget, just a fad. And it was quite expensive at the time, of course, as well. But obviously, technology moves on, and I don't know the price, but I assume that the price is more affordable these days. But wearables is another good example of the connected worker and how technology can benefit a worker. And with the wearables, obviously, you could be doing inventory management, you could be doing stock picking, and the glasses or the hardware that you're wearing could be telling you what to pick next or telling you what stock levels there are, giving you the information at your fingertips as you work. And it would also be hands-free, of course, as well.
Yeah. And I think it's very much, again, it's like a here and now technology, isn't it, that people could be using. And again, through COVID, we saw it, people using it particularly for remote support, where, you could wear a set of glasses with a camera and it would show an engineer what you're looking at, and maybe you're looking inside a panel and they can provide advice remotely as to, what breaker to switch and this kind of thing. As those trends go on, I guess it's a question of if people are genuinely removing people from the shop floor, is that a trend that's set to continue, or actually does it remove the need for that kind of technology eventually? And, picking in warehouses isn't far off being purely done mechanically or through automated robots or whatever. What do you think?
I don't know. What do I think?
I think I've got a good point.
Yes.
But it depends if you believe that trend's going to continue, I suppose. And personally, I think it will, but it's probably a long way off compared to getting value from things like wearables and having information at your fingertips.
I think it all comes down to what makes sense for the company. It's always a question of, it's less about the technology and more about the cost versus the benefit to the business.
Yeah.
There's no point in just doing something for the sake of doing something. Yeah, there has to be a benefit.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that leads us quite nicely into like the key point from this talk is that although trends are moving in that direction of removing people from the shop floor, right now it's about providing real value to the people who are on the shop floor. So rather than taking those jobs away from them, actually, how can we assist them in doing them quicker and more effectively with less risk to themselves? And so, yeah, I agree that this sort of here and now, people should be really focusing not on technology for technology's sake, but really on starting to bring value to those workers. And I think that's the trend that probably will continue, because I suppose Industry 4 has been very much about productivity and get more out the door and this kind of thing. Whereas Industry 5 maybe promises a bit more in terms of, let's do it right. Let's have a nice place to work. Let's do it safely. Let's focus on
human-centric. Focus on the worker.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's got to be a benefit to either the worker or the business, or ideally both.
So to summarize, I'd say the key takeaways, obviously we've talked about lights out manufacturing. That's quite a distant vision that people are working towards. But the important things for today is that whatever technology we're putting onto the shop floor has to be focused around value, particularly towards the worker. And so we're not talking about taking their jobs away at the moment. We're talking about making their jobs easier. And so anything we do in terms of technology and digital transformation should be focused on making those workers' lives easier.
Which in turn will benefit the business.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us. This is going to be a mini-series, so we'll have another 2 podcasts episodes where we deep dive a little bit more into some of these topics. So we hope you can join us for those as well. Thank you.